Howdy folks, and welcome to the Hillbilly Kitchen. Today we're making Serviceman's candy. Now this is a very old recipe, and the only place where I could find it was handwritten in the back of an old church cookbook. I think the instructions for it were probably intended for use on a wood stove too. So I had to do some modification on it, and I also had to cut the batch down. The batch that I have a recipe for literally cannot be cooked in my largest pot. So what you're going to need is a 12-ounce can of evaporated milk. Now this is not sweetened condensed, it's just evaporated milk. About 2.5 cups of sugar, about 3/4 of a cup of white corn syrup, and we're going to combine this stuff on the stove and bring it up to a hard ball stage, which is around 250-260 degrees. Once it gets there, we're going to add in a 1/2 cup of toasted coconut and a 1/2 cup of chopped nuts. You can use any kind of nuts or any kind of coconut. You just want to put it in the oven about 325, spread it out on a cookie sheet, and toast it for a few minutes until it's brown. And about 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla. Now you're also going to have to lightly butter about an 8x8 or 9x9 pan to put this in when you're done. So this takes a few minutes. Let's go ahead and take the stuff that has to be cooked over to the stove and get it started. Okay, I said the instructions for this were probably for a wood stove because it said to cook this over low heat. Now the thermostat on my stove on low heat will not heat any liquid up to 260 degrees. It just won't get that hot. It cuts the stove off. To cook this on my stove, I have to set it on exactly medium. A 5. It will not get hot enough any lower than a 5. You may have to go a little bit hotter on your stove. Electric stoves where they have that thermostat, they cut off when they get so hot. So there's absolutely no way that you could cook this on low. I first saw this recipe in the back of the cookbook about 7 or 8 months ago. And I decided to save it for Veterans Day, and I wanted to make it for Veterans Day, and I had hoped that I would be able to find an address where you could send care packages full of homemade candy to service members who were away from home for the holidays. You can't do that anymore. Apparently it's too dangerous because there's so many mean people in the world. But there are several charities that put together care packages of manufactured goodies, and they send them to service members. And you can donate money to those charities, but you can't send homemade stuff anymore unless you have the name of a specific person. Maybe if you have a family member or a friend who is serving, you can send something to them, maybe send enough to them that they can share with other people, but you can't just send care packages to a military base not addressed to an individual. So that's kind of sad. But this candy, I am pretty sure, at least dates back to the mid-1800s, to the dispute in this country between the blue and the gray. And I know I'm talking all cryptic like, but I don't want this video to be taken down. You can look up that dispute in the mid-1800s. I know that it was sent to service members in the early 1900s and the mid-1900s because I heard first-hand accounts of it. And the last time I made this with my granny, and it was like 45 years ago. So I didn't remember exactly how to make it, and like I said, the instructions that I have are almost non-existent, and I'm pretty sure they're for a wood stove. So I had to modify the recipe a little bit. I mean, I didn't change any of the original ingredients. I just cut them down. This is about a third of a batch, maybe a little bit more. But the recipe I had 6 cups of sugar and a 19-ounce can of evaporated milk and a 13-ounce can of evaporated milk. Well, you can't even buy evaporated milk in those sizes anymore. So I modified it and made it so that you could use readily available stuff today. Now, this recipe says that it lasts indefinitely and it improves with age. All you have to do is store it in an airtight container. So if it is something that you want to send to someone around Christmas time this year, you don't have to worry about it spoiling. Or if you're looking for some kind of homemade candy that you can make and sit on the countertop and not worry about it going bad, this is it. My first attempt at making this, it looked like a science experiment gone wrong or something. Like I said, by memory, after 45 years, I expected it to act about like fudge. Well, it does not. It expands much more than fudge. You can see what a small amount is in here. And like I said, I cut it down to about a third of a batch, but I didn't expect it to grow much more than double. It grows much more than that. So you need a large pot to cook this in, even the third of a batch, or you'll have a mess. Now, you do want to stir this while you cook it. You don't want to just turn it on and walk off and leave it, because it has all the milk in it and it will scorch. It's going to take it anywhere from 5 to 7 minutes to start boiling, and then once it starts boiling, you're still going to be cooking it for a few minutes, at least 10 from the time it starts boiling. You don't want to stir it too fast, because if you do, it will never boil and it will never get up to that temperature that we have to get it at. But you do have to keep stirring it, because if you leave it sitting on the bottom of the pan, you'll have a bunch of scorched milk. I wanted to do this candy on Veterans Day because I wanted to thank all of the men and women who have served in the military. I know we're about to lose all the members of the greatest generation. We have very few of them left. My grandfather served overseas in 1945 and 1946. My father served, and my husband served. I don't think we have any current members in the military in our family right now. My cousin Monica's husband, Eric, just retired from the military. He was career military, and I think he was the last family member that we had in. So thank you, Eric, for your service, and I want to thank all the other men and women who are watching this who have served, especially those of you who came home in the 60s and the 70s, and you weren't exactly greeted the way that you should have been. The whole country does not feel the way some people did, and there are some of us who truly appreciate your service and your effort and your sacrifice and all that you've lost serving this country. We appreciate that. We know what a sacrifice it was, and we are grateful to you for what you did. Okay, we're starting to get some bubbles now. So we're still going to have, like I said, at least 10 minutes of stirring here. And then once we get up to temperature, and I am going to use a candy thermometer on this, we're going to take it off the heat and stir it until it starts to get a little bit thick. Then we're going to add the other ingredients. If you don't work pretty quick once it starts to get thick, it will get too thick to actually dump it out and spread it in your pan. It gets thick pretty quick when it gets thick. Okay, I know that this still is not anywhere close to what I want, because when it gets close to that point that we're looking for, it's going to shrink back down in the pan and it's going to get really dark. But I was going to stick this in here just to show you. We want to go up to between 250 and 260 degrees Fahrenheit, about 125 Celsius. We're at about 230 degrees now, and this last 20 degrees, it seems like it just takes for forever to get it that hot. I really would be afraid to turn the stove up to do it any faster, because I would be afraid of burning it. And I said when I started this, I think the directions that I have were for a wood stove, because it said to cook it on low heat. And like I said, this stove, the thermostat on it will not cook this on low heat, because the thermostat cuts off and it would never get it that hot. But if you were using a wood stove, you would cook it like after you'd made your meal or something, when the fire had died down. And I suspect that's probably when this was made. It's not really like any other candy. It's harder than fudge. It's definitely as sweet as fudge. You can taste the coconut in it. I'm trying to think what it tastes like. It tastes a little bit buttery, even though there's no butter in it. I guess that's from the milk. You can taste the vanilla in it. When I first started looking at the recipe, I kind of thought, gee, that's not much vanilla in it. The original recipe with the 6 cups of sugar and stuff, it only had a half a teaspoon of vanilla in it. And I thought, you're not even going to be able to taste that. But the corn syrup also has vanilla in it. So you can taste the vanilla, and that is enough vanilla. The nuts don't seem to add a whole lot of flavor to them, or not detectable flavor when you eat it. I'm curious to see what it's going to taste like in like a month too, because the recipe said it improves with age. Brett said it tastes a little bit like peanut butter fudge with coconut in it. You can see it's really settled back down in the pan now. It's almost maybe 2 times the size it was when I put the ingredients in there. And you can see it is starting to turn kind of a yellowish brown color. That, you're getting close, but we're not there yet. We're at a softball stage. We still need about another, oh gosh, 15, 20 degrees on this. Alright, we have finally reached temperature. I'm going to get this candy thermometer out of here and turn it off. Okay, so we want to stir it really fast until it starts to get just a little bit thick. Now at this point you handle it kind of like you do fudge if you've been making fudge for a while. But like I said, it gets a little harder than fudge, or at least a little harder than the fudge with marshmallow cream. You don't get the air in it like you do in fudge. When I mix up my fudge, it kind of puffs up a little bit with air. This does not. Somebody commented on how short I was. I am pretty short. And I actually have a stool in the kitchen, and normally I would pull this off the stove and sit it on my stool because it's a few inches lower than the countertop and it's easier to mix it. I'm standing on my tiptoes to mix this. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and add my other ingredients now because it's getting just a little bit thick, and like I said, if you wait too long you won't be able to get it in the pan. my vanilla and my nuts and my toasted coconut. And you want to mix that up good. You can really smell that toasted coconut when you pour it in here, when the heat from the candy hits it. Okay, now it's starting to thicken up pretty quick. I better get it over to my pan. Alright, now that's all there is to making it. If you're going to make this, you do want to have about half an hour where you're not going to have to do anything else, because you're going to be standing in there stirring it for a while. Like I said, it does take a little while to get it that hot, and I wouldn't turn it up any higher because I would be afraid of scorching the milk. You want to let it sit here and cool for maybe 20-25 minutes, not too long, and then cut it into squares, store it in an airtight container, and according to the original recipe, it lasts indefinitely and improves with age. It will get really firm. This was just made today and it's already very firm. It will break, but you want to cut it before it gets this firm. You don't want to let it get that firm and then try to cut it, because it'll be too hard to cut, and instead of cutting in pieces, it'll just break up. But that gives you some idea what the texture is going to be like when it gets done. It does get pretty firm. Well, I hope you give this a try, especially if you have a service member that you can send it to. Or like I said, if you've got somebody that just lives far away and you want some candy that's safe to mail, this is safe to mail. Thank you again to all of our veterans who have served this country. We truly appreciate everything that you have done. And thank you all for joining us in the Hillbilly Kitchen. Please don't forget to click like and subscribe before you leave. And until next time, remember to put God first.